Today we're making a vase full of fall florals entirely in Procreate. In today's tutorial, we'll be painting digital gouache style fall florals in Procreate, complete with a transparent vase and some hand lettering. We'll use one of my free vase stamps to get us started, and then we'll use a few different brushes from my Gouache Lovers brush set, including the streaky semi-transparent brush for the majority of our elements, the liner brush for berry stems, diluted brush to fill up our vase, and the dried out brush for extra texture details and our lettering. The color palette is free as always. Just hit the link in the video description and you can download and install it. I'm going to start by creating a brand new canvas. I've listed my specs on screen, and let's begin. Okay, I've got my brand new canvas, and the first thing we're going to do is define our background color. So come to your layers, tap on background color, and select the very first color on the top row. The next thing we're going to do is pop in our vase. This vase is part of my free vase stamps. There are 10 vases in this brush set. I'll leave a link on screen and in the video description to the set. I am using vase number 8, but you could use any of these vases. And the color of my vase is going to be this lightest color on the very bottom row. And I'm just going to tap it with my finger once, and that gives me my size that I can adjust. So I'm just going to reduce it down a little bit. I have uniform and snapping turned on down here. That way I'm scaling proportionally, and I'm going to establish a size that will still give me room to add in all of my floral and foliage elements, but also some room at the bottom for my lettering. If you don't want to add lettering, then just make it a little bit larger. And now I'm going to reduce the transparency, so tap on the little N and drag the opacity down to about 40%. This will let us see through the vase so we can see the water that's inside of it as well as the stems. Next, I'm going to create a brand new layer, drag that layer right underneath your vase layer, and we're going to fill it up with water. So I'm going to grab my blue color right here and head into my Gouache Lovers brush set. We're going to use this diluted paintbrush for our water because it's got that extra texture to it, so it looks a little more like watercolor. And all I'm going to do is paint within the vase. I like leaving a little bit of an edge within it. That way it seems like the vase has some thickness to the glass. To make things blend a little bit better between the vase color and the background color, I'm going to change the blend mode of my water to multiply. So just drag this up to multiply, and you can also reduce the opacity on this as well. I'm going to come down to about 50%. I'm going to tap on my top layer, create a brand new layer. Now it's time to start painting in our florals, and I always like beginning with my most dominant florals, the florals that are going to grab the viewer's attention most. In this case, these are going to be large pink flowers. So I'm going to grab my lightest pink color up on the top row, and I'm going to switch to my streaky semi-transparent brush. I'm going to use this brush for the majority of elements in our bouquet because it's got a really beautiful texture to it. So I'm going to just paint in very simple florals. Mine are going to be 5 petals, and I'm going to vary the size of these. If I want one facing in this direction, I'll make these petals large, and then as it gets closer to the opposite side, I'll make these petals smaller. And maybe just to balance things out, I want it to be full, so I don't want it to be too narrow here, so I'm going to add one right here and one right here just to make it a little more full. Now that feels nice and full, I'm going to add in some extra details to this. So I'm just going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab my lightest color, and I'm just going to put an extra layer of petals now that are right on the inside. I'm reducing the brush size a little bit, so it's almost like an extra layer. This is just a made-up flower, so you can really do whatever you want here. I'm just giving myself some extra details to work with. Okay, and then to add in yet even more details, I'm going to create a brand new layer and grab this kind of tan color at the very end. And I'm just going to put in, I'm going to reduce the size of this quite a bit. I'm down to 3%. I'm just going to put in a few lines right here. Next thing is we're going to focus on the stamen and add in a few extra details there. So I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to grab my darkest color, which is the second one on the top row, and I'm going to increase the size a little bit and just put a little blob right in the middle of each one of these. To add in one last piece of detail, create a brand new layer, and I'm going to grab this brown color. It's the third one, so it's the next darkest one. And I'm going to reduce my size way down to like 2%, and I'm just going to stipple in a few dots here just to add that extra bit of final detail on this. Now that these flowers are all taken care of, we can move on to our next elements. I'm going to group all of these together just to stay a little bit more organized, and then I'm going to create a brand new layer and drag it underneath that layer because I want these ones to be the hero. So now whatever I paint in, it will appear behind these flowers. The next element will be some detailed berries. So I'm going to keep my streaky semi-transparent brush still selected, and I'm going to switch to this kind of rusty orange color, and I'm going to increase my size up to about 8%. So I'm going to put one right in the center, and the way that I do it is I draw one down, and then I do one on the side, one on the other side, and then I'll put another one in the middle. And I'll come all the way down like that. So even though I've got a lot of gaps between them, it still gives the impression that it's got volume and it's still really full. Now I'm going to put one up here, and I'm going to angle it in so it's drawing your eye towards the center, and I'm going to put another one over here and reduce the scale of it a little bit, and maybe a little one off to the side here. Okay, to add a little bit more detail to these, I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab that same pink color that we used for our primary flowers, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a highlight on them. So my light source is coming straight down. So these ones will have it right on the side here, and I'm just putting a little dot. And you probably noticed that I haven't drawn any stems in yet, and I do that on purpose because if you draw your stems too early on, it can get overcrowded with stems, and then the focus will shift from your primary, more beautiful elements to all these supporting elements that just become really cluttered. So that's why I save them for later. The next thing we're going to do is add in some more supporting berries, but these ones are going to be on top of these flowers. That way we can show a sense of depth without them overpowering, since they are going to be a more simple element. So I'm going to create a brand new layer right at the very top. We can actually group these two berry layers together. And on this brand new layer, we're just going to grab our darkest red color. So it's the fourth one on the top row. What I'm going to do is just put in a few sporadic dots right here, and they're going to vary in size a bit, and these are just going to be like little berry clusters. Instead of going straight down vertically, they're just clustered up at the top, and they're going to have a stem that comes down. I think that's probably enough. I'm going to put an extra one right here so I can fill out this middle without it just being chock full of foliage. So now that we have our primary elements drawn in, I'm going to add in some bulkier foliage that's just going to support it and push it forward. So these are just going to be really large leaves, and then we'll get into our more detailed foliage after that. Create a brand new layer, drag it all the way above your vase layer, and this is going to be our first foliage layer, and I'm going to make it the darkest green color. So grab this one, and what I'm going to do is just paint in just some really basic leaves. And the way that I draw leaves is I go light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And with this brush, you can get some really nice streaky texture within those leaves too. So if you have trouble drawing these, just create a brand new canvas in Procreate and practice just going light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, and just do it over and over again. It does take a little bit of practice, but once you get that muscle memory, it makes it so fast and easy to paint leaves. So all I'm going to do is just continue that all the way around this bouquet just to make it feel really full. And remember that we have 3 different greens that we'll use for this, so you don't have to fill it all out with just the darkest green. I like putting this darker green in the center the most, and then I'll put a few around the outside so it can poke through once I have some of those lighter greens right on top of it. So now I'm going to create a brand new layer, switch to the next darkest green, so it's the second one on the bottom row, and just begin layering this in. And my goal here is to eliminate any of the background color peeking through the center of my bouquet. Switch to the next lightest green, so this is our last green layer, and just put in a few of these. I usually have the lightest color the fewest amount throughout the bouquet because it is going to call more attention to itself because it is lighter. The next thing I'm going to do is add in the rest of our foliage. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, drag it underneath our green layers right here. I can just group these together. I'll label this group green. And on this one, I'm going to add in some brown elements. So I'm going to grab the third brown, switch to my dried out brush. My size is about 7%. So draw a line down and then just scribble on each side. Okay, and then just to round everything out and give myself a nice anchor in the background, I'm going to create a brand new layer, drag it underneath that layer, and this one's going to be white, so it's the lightest color down here at the bottom. I'm going to switch back to the streaky semi-transparent brush, and these ones are going to be larger, and they're going to kind of give something for everything to rest on top of that's going to support it. So I'm not going to draw too many of these, but these are going to come up, and then you're going to have a leaf up at the top, and then a leaf on each side, so it's symmetrical on each side. If you're interested in learning more about painting digital gouache florals and foliage in Procreate, I have an entire course. It's called Gouache Botanicals in Procreate. It takes you from very beginner style lessons and advances you through the course to more intricate and in-depth projects, so no matter your skill level, you'll be able to follow along exactly. For more details and information about that course, hit the link on screen or in the video description. I want my stems to come all the way through these berry elements, so I'm going to come all the way from the top down to the bottom until I run into some of these primary elements, and then I'm going to finish the stem off within the vase. I notice that I have this green group. It's sitting a little bit on top of the vase, and I want it behind the vase because I want to be able to draw these stems on top of my green layers. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this green group and drag it underneath the water layer. And that will allow me to put all of my stems on top. But when I did that, you can see that some of my white is now showing, and I don't want that to show. So I can just select that layer and drag it underneath my green group. And now that's also taken care of. And I think all of my brown elements are fine. You could also bring those down too. Let's just do that. Okay, so now let's draw on that stem. That stem is going to be right underneath the water. So I'm going to tap on my green group now, create a brand new layer, and I'm going to switch to the darkest brown color. I'm going to use my liner brush, and I'm going to make it pretty small because this is going to be a really hard line. I'm down to 2%, and I'm going to connect these berries straight down. So these berries that are right in the middle, I'm going to connect those first until I run into a primary element. I don't want to disrupt this, so I'm going to just connect to this main stem now, anything that's kind of still floating. And I'm going to repeat that for all of these other elements, and then we'll draw this into the vase after that. So I've got like 5 clusters of these, so I'm just going to draw stem down. If you remember, I had these berries that are on top of these floral elements, so I need to put my berry stems on 2 different layers. I need a stem that's going to be above the floral elements, and then I need a stem within the vase. So I can draw the stems within the vase first this time since I'm already on the stem layer. So I'm just going to draw in some extra stems, but this time the color is going to be this red color. So I'm going to grab that and just draw a few more stems in here. And then I can come all the way up here. I believe this is the layer with my berries. It is. I can create a brand new layer right on top of it, and I can just connect these. So I'm going to pretend like this is sitting on top and then it goes behind these other berries. So I'm just going to draw a line down until I hit that berry and just connect these up here. So they're not going to be too distracting. So I'm just going to add in just a few more stems. So I'm going to grab my darkest green color, and I still have my liner brush selected, but I'm coming up to 3%, and you want to make sure that you're beneath the water, so I can just create a brand new layer here, and that way I know I'm going to be behind all of those elements. So I'm just drawing a few in. And make sure you change up the lengths on them too. I feel like these stems are just a little dominant in here, and I want to reduce their opacity. So I'm just going to tap on the end and just lower this down a bit. I'm coming down to about 60%. The last thing I'm going to do is just add in some hand lettering. So I'm going to come to the very top, create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab my medium brown color, so it's the 3rd one on the top row. I've got my dried out brush selected. I'm going to increase the size up to about 12%. And I'm going to turn on my drawing guide just so I have some straight lines, so my lettering stays on a straight line. And you can just write whatever you want. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you next week.